Why on earth did Jesus put his fingers in the man's ears and spitting touch his tongue? Why? Jesus could have very easily just pronounced the words and the man would have been healed. In fact, in Mark's gospel, prior to this healing, Jesus did exactly that. With words, he cured the demoniac. With words, he cured Simon's mother-in-law. He cleansed the leper. He healed the paralytic. He healed the man with the withered hand, the Gerasene demoniac. He raised Jairus' daughter, all just by speaking a word. So he clearly didn't need to stick his fingers in the man's ear and spitting touch his tongue. Yet he did. So we ask, why did Jesus do that? It was clearly not necessary for Jesus to do that. But it was necessary for the man. It was necessary for the man that Jesus put his fingers in his ears and spitting touch his tongue. Jesus could have pronounced the words as he often did, but he chose not to. And he chose not to because if he had just pronounced the words, the man wouldn't have heard him. Yes, healing would have certainly taken place, but there would have been a natural distance between the man healed and Jesus who was healing. And so Jesus made the healing personal and particular for the man to experience the intimacy of the healing so that he could use one of his main senses, a sense that he had the faculties to use, to be able to touch, to feel. And so Jesus saw that it was necessary for this man. It was necessary for the man because his physical deafness and physical muteness signified a deeper spiritual deafness and a deeper spiritual muteness. He could not hear Jesus, and thus he couldn't proclaim Jesus, couldn't proclaim the good news. And so Jesus touched that place and unlocked the man. Jesus touched that place and unlocked the man to receive him. And so our invitation from the gospel, from our readings, is to allow Jesus to touch that place in us. Whatever that place may be, whatever's on the mind and the heart as we enter into this Mass, to allow Jesus to touch that place that needs unlocked, that needs him. Maybe it's a particular sin or struggle or fight that we're in the midst of. Maybe it's a bad habit. Examples: anger, resentment, anxiety, lust, addictions, constant scrolling, various wounds that we have, unforgiveness, things that we need reconciled and healed from. That's where Jesus wants to touch. It can be painful, of course. Healing is often painful. But Jesus is healer. It's who he is, not just what he does, but who he is. It wasn't necessary for Jesus to touch, but it was necessary for the man to be touched by Jesus, because it gave him a personal encounter with Jesus and his healing presence to make him whole. And so our invitation from the gospel, from the readings, to allow Jesus to touch that place, that it may become in you a beautiful place of encounter with Jesus. We have incredible stories of places of encounter where Jesus touches and things, perhaps little by little, sometimes instantaneous, are healed. if you permit me to cross over to a different gospel passage, where Peter had his threefold denial of Jesus. And then Jesus, in turn, had his threefold beckoning of Peter back. This wound that Peter had, touched in a particular way by Jesus, this intimate encounter that Jesus had with Peter. Had Peter not had denied, there would not have been as beautiful and intimate of a touch that Jesus had for Peter. So Peter needed to be touched in that way by Jesus. Our invitation from the gospel to allow Jesus to touch that place in us, that it may become in us a beautiful place of intimacy with him, so that we might go out and proclaim. We think of the examples of someone who battled addiction for quite some time and that healing process, and are now sponsors in AA or active members in AA. This wound, this struggle, this healing, this movement outward to proclaim. Or we think of St. Thomas with his, "No, unless I touch his hands, I won't believe." And that personal, particular encounter and healing. And Thomas, one of the apostles to go the farthest out proclaiming Jesus, went all the way to India to proclaim Jesus. This wound, this struggle, this healing, this outward movement. And that's what Jesus wants for us. And Jesus very much gives us the means to receive that personal touch and that healing in the word proclaimed, in the word received, either proclaimed here or proclaimed in and through a loved one. Jesus gives us his healing in the sacraments. Yes, of course, in the sacrament of reconciliation, and also healing in the Eucharist. Jesus invites other avenues, other ways of healing in and through counseling, in and through therapy. These things that the Lord uses to touch us in a particular way. Jesus could have just pronounced healing over the man, but he chose not to, because he wanted him to have a personal and particular encounter of his healing presence. And he desires that for each of us, so that we can go out, so that we can proclaim like the prophet Isaiah, and so that we can proclaim like this man who was healed in our gospel. He comes to save you. The eyes of the blind will be opened. The ears of the deaf will be cleared. The lame will leap like a stag, and the tongue of the mute will sing.